In everyone's life, there comes a time when they face the challenges of aging, the loss of loved ones, and the feeling of loneliness. But how can one learn to live a full life despite all these difficulties? The following is the story of Mark Thompson, a 62-year-old man who faced the trials of aging alone. His journey shows how much resilience and emotional depth a person can discover when they decide to embrace every moment they have left. Mark Thompson, who turned 62 this year, worked in a government service agency in the United States for almost half his life. After a restructuring in his department, he was offered early retirement. Fortunately, he had always lived modestly and had some savings. His financial situation wasn't terrible, but he didn't consider himself wealthy either. Nevertheless, for a while, he thought his life was perfectly fine. Years ago, his house was filled with warmth, his wife Anna, his son Adam, and his daughter Eve. But over the years, his family dwindled. The children grew up, got married, and moved out of the house. Adam lives about 2 hours north with his wife, and Eve is in another state with her husband. Several years ago, his wife passed away after a long illness. In an instant, he was left alone in a house that was once full of life and activity. What was he going to do next? One evening, immersed in the silence of the living room, he felt loneliness penetrate every cell of his being. Suddenly, the phone rang, breaking the oppressive atmosphere. It was Adam, his son, on the line. Adam's voice sounded rushed, as if he had been meaning to call for a long time, but had only just found the time. He asked if his father was home alone, expressing regret that he couldn't come with Kate due to unforeseen circumstances at work. A flicker of disappointment ran through the man's soul, but he tried to be understanding. Adam, after all, was absorbed in his career and caring for his own family. Not wanting to burden his son, he assured him that everything was fine and there was nothing to worry about. But after ending the call, he couldn't help but let out a deep sigh. The feeling that the world was slipping away from him was growing stronger. In the past, his life had been filled with daily commutes to work and caring for his family. Now, having retired, he was left alone with his thoughts. After his wife's passing, the children left their childhood home, striving to build their own futures. The emptiness grew, taking on an almost physical form, reminding him of the fleeting nature of time and the inevitable changes in life. The next day the door opened, and Mr. Lewis, my neighbor, appeared on the threshold. This kind-hearted man, almost my age, always knew how to lift my spirits with a casual conversation. During a relaxed chat, he suddenly asked, "Mark, you live here alone, right?" In response, I simply nodded silently. He, in turn, let out a deep sigh and said, "I understand your condition perfectly. My wife passed away, and the children are absorbed in their own concerns. I know what it's like to feel the creeping loneliness." His words struck me with a painful sting, like touching a healing bruise. The pain was stronger than I was willing to admit, but at the same time, there was a strange support in them. It turns out I'm not alone in my loneliness. Countless elderly people face similar heartache. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said a phrase that stuck in my head for a long time. "We've reached the age where we need to look to the future. If the day comes when you're completely alone in this huge house, what will you do?" These words pierced my consciousness like tiny needles. I involuntarily began to imagine scenes where I was completely alone, without a single soul to exchange words with, without anyone's care. If I get sick, how will I cope? This question haunted me day and night, like an echo resonating in the empty space of my mind. Soon after this event, the narrator's daughter, Eve, visited him briefly, bringing his beloved granddaughter with her. In anticipation of a heartfelt and lengthy conversation, the father even prepared some of Eve's favorite dishes, reminding her of her childhood. However, as soon as she crossed the threshold of the house, the daughter said that she had very little time, as she needed to pick up Ryan, and there was complete chaos at work right now. Worry was written on her face. She was under a lot of stress, trying to successfully combine her career and family responsibilities. Of course, the father would have liked to spend much more than just 15 minutes with her, but he could only say that he was fine. Eve quickly ate a few bites of the prepared food, took her daughter, and left, asking her father to take care of himself as a parting word. Standing by the window, he watched them disappear from view, feeling completely empty. That night, he couldn't fall asleep for a long time, tossing and turning in bed. His thoughts kept returning to Mr. Lewis's words, to the idea that he might spend the rest of his life alone. He realized he couldn't just drift along. He needed a clear plan of action. A few days later, the narrator suggested to Mr. Lewis that they take a walk in the local park. They sat on a bench, watching people pass by. At one point, he turned to his friend and said that he had been thinking a lot about his words. If they were indeed destined to be alone in their old age, how would they cope? Mr. Lewis nodded, confirming that he had also been pondering this question. He noted that there were several aspects they should prepare for in advance. First and foremost, the financial aspect. It was necessary to ensure sufficient savings to cover all essential needs, such as paying bills, buying groceries, and medical care to avoid unpleasant surprises. The narrator fully agreed with this statement. Money, of course, cannot guarantee happiness, but without providing for the essentials, old age and solitude could become unbearably difficult. Therefore, he dedicated several days to carefully analyzing his finances, assessing his future needs, including potential medical expenses. He concluded that careful planning was crucial. Continuing, Mr. Lewis emphasized that one cannot endlessly rely on the help of children, as they have their own lives, and distance doesn't always allow them to be nearby when needed. He urged maintaining an active lifestyle, engaging in sports, attending group classes, and avoiding social isolation. These words made Mr. Lewis realize that after retirement he had effectively cut himself off from the world, spending time watching television and staring at empty walls, rarely leaving his home. Loneliness gradually consumed him, both physically and mentally. Recognizing this, Mr. Lewis decided to change his life. He began visiting the park every morning, where he engaged in light jogging, or at least performed stretching exercises. In the evenings, he started attending the community center to play chess or other board games with other retirees. Gradually, he made new friends, and his life was once again filled with companionship and interests. Nevertheless, at times, especially at night when he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the silence weighed on him. He couldn't shake the thought of who would care for him in case of a serious illness. These anxieties haunted him until one day the idea of finding a companion in his twilight years came to him. This idea evoked conflicting feelings in Mr. Lewis. His wife had passed away only a few years ago, and he feared betraying her memory. However, over time, the pain of loneliness became increasingly unbearable. Ultimately, the man decided to share his thoughts with Mr. Lewis, opening up his heartfelt concerns. After carefully listening to his confession, Mr. Lewis spoke words full of wisdom and understanding. "Mark, there is nothing wrong with seeking companionship and intimacy in old age. It's not about finding a servant or housekeeper, but about wanting to share the joys and sorrows of life with someone to banish the oppressive loneliness." These words were like balm to the man's soul, easing his guilt. He realized that the desire to find a life partner was not a betrayal of the memory of his late wife, but simply a natural desire to continue living a life filled with love and warmth. One evening, during one of the events at the community center, fate brought him together with Linda Brown, a friendly and good-natured woman his age. Like him, she lived alone, as her children had moved to different states in search of work. Linda radiated energy and zest for life, adored day trips, and seemed to enjoy every moment of her life. There was an immediate mutual attraction between them, and they exchanged phone numbers, soon beginning to communicate regularly. Over time, they discovered that they enjoyed going to the grocery store together, experimenting with new recipes, and taking morning walks. Linda's presence filled the man's home with light and joy, which he thought had been lost forever. Eventually, Linda became an integral part of his life, moving into his home. They saw no need to formally solidify their relationship with marriage, preferring their union to be based on deeper feelings. Their life together flowed at a peaceful pace, like that of any loving couple. They spent evenings in heartfelt conversations, watching the news, or discussing minor events that had occurred during the day. One day he was struck by a severe fever. Linda immediately showed care and attention, monitoring his medication intake, gently wiping his forehead with a cool cloth, and even calling his son Adam to help take him to the doctor. Upon arriving, Adam was touched by Linda's devotion, but quickly composed himself. "Dad, why didn't you tell me sooner?" he reproached. "If you're sick, you should tell me." He only smiled wearily in response. "Son, I didn't want to worry you, and Linda is doing a wonderful job." Adam nodded, and he could feel his appreciation. At the hospital, the doctor reassured him, saying he just needed rest. Adam insisted that he stay with him until he recovered, but he refused. He was more comfortable at home, and Linda knew his habits better than anyone else. This minor incident highlighted the importance of having someone nearby who genuinely cares about his well-being. Their quiet, unbreakable connection blossomed. Perhaps it was different from the fiery passion of young lovers, but it was a steady, gentle presence that dispelled the shadows of loneliness. He felt he had finally found the long-awaited peace in his mature years. However, as is well known, life rarely goes according to plan. One sunny day, Linda's son, who lived in a neighboring state, shared the joyous news of his upcoming wedding and expressed his hope that Linda would be able to come and help organize the celebration. Linda's gaze reflected an internal struggle. She realized that her companionship meant a lot to the narrator, but at the same time felt an overwhelming need to be with her son at such an important moment in his life. Overcoming his own feelings, the narrator said, "Linda, that's wonderful news. He's your son, and family is sacred. You absolutely have to go." Silence hung in the air, and tears glistened in Linda's eyes. "I've grown so used to this place, and I'm not sure I'll be of much help, but I suppose I really should be there for my children," she said. The narrator, forcing a smile, assured her, "They need you, Linda. It's a mother's duty, and I'll manage." It was a lie, as the narrator actually felt devastated. A few days later, Linda set off, and the narrator personally escorted her to the bus station. Standing on the platform, he watched Linda board the bus and felt as if a heavy stone had weighed down his heart. As the bus pulled away, the narrator stood frozen, as if chained to the spot. And once again, he was left alone with a house that seemed overwhelmingly large and ominously silent. After Linda's departure, the protagonist attempted to return to his usual life, resuming contact with neighbors, visiting the community center, and keeping in touch with his children by phone. However, the previous loneliness was replaced by an even more painful feeling. His son Adam and daughter Eve, concerned about their father's depressed tone during regular calls, expressed their anxiety. But, given their distance and their own life circumstances, the protagonist could not count on their constant presence and care. Several months later, the protagonist overheard a conversation at the community center about nursing homes, specialized facilities for the elderly, offering medical care, group activities, and socializing with peers. This idea made him think about the possibility of moving to such a place. During one of the phone calls, Adam anxiously asked, "Dad, are you really thinking about moving into a nursing home? Won't it be depressing?" The protagonist, taking a deep breath, replied, "Son, it's not a matter of whether it's depressing or not. I just need a stable place where I won't be afraid of being left alone in case something happens. You and Eve can't always be around. In a nursing home, where there is medical staff and the opportunity to socialize with peers, I won't be waiting alone for help if I get sick or find myself in a difficult situation." After a moment of thought, Adam declared his intention to talk to Eve. A few days later, they visited their father together, sitting next to him. Eve, with obvious concern in her voice, asked her father if he was really sure about his decision to move into a nursing home, understanding how difficult it was for him to live alone. The father gently explained that he had been considering this step for some time, seeking a place where he could be surrounded by people facing similar life circumstances. He expressed his gratitude for their willingness to help, but emphasized that he could not constantly rely on their support given their work, children, and their own concerns. After exchanging glances, Adam and Eve expressed their support for their father, promising to visit him regularly. Soon after, the father moved into a quiet nursing home located in the suburbs. This place offered its residents a well-kept garden, cozy lounges, and the company of friendly elderly people who became his new neighbors. One of the residents, a Mr. Vernon, took the newcomer under his wing from the very first day, giving him an introductory tour and introducing him to other chess enthusiasts. On his first night in his new place, lying in bed, the father looked out the window at the lunar landscape and felt a sense of relief. Despite the unfamiliar surroundings, he no longer felt alone. There were people around ready to offer support, staff providing care, and new friends always up for a chat or a cup of coffee. Over the next 6 months, I adjusted to my new living situation. I started regularly attending the dining hall, joined the Tai Chi group every morning, and resumed my daily games of board games with several new friends. Adam and Eve visited me from time to time, bringing their children with them. I constantly tried to assure them that I was fine, and frankly, I began to feel a certain degree of contentment and peace. But one day, as I was enjoying the warm sunshine in the courtyard, the phone rang. It was Adam, and his voice sounded genuinely alarmed. He reported that Linda had been in a serious car accident and was in intensive care in critical condition. My heart pounded in my chest, and the phone almost slipped out of my hand. I asked him if he was sure and tried to find out which hospital she was in. Adam named the place and offered to pick me up. The ride to the hospital was a blur. Memories flashed through my mind of the day Linda left, how I tried to stay strong, and our promise to keep in touch. I never imagined it would end like this. In the waiting room, I saw Adam and Eve, their faces etched with deep concern. Adam came over to me and told me that the doctors were still fighting for Linda's life, but the situation looked extremely unfavorable. I froze, staring at the red emergency light above the operating room door, and the pounding of my heart echoed in my ears. In the complete silence, I prayed, clinging to the faint hope that Linda's strong spirit would help her pull through. The minutes stretched on agonizingly until, finally, a weary doctor appeared. We rushed to him immediately, and I struggled to ask about Linda's condition. The doctor shook his head and explained that the injuries were too severe, and Linda's age significantly complicated the operation and recovery process. He uttered the words, "No one wants to hear. We should prepare for the worst." I felt my legs buckle, and Adam helped me into a chair. My mind went blank with disbelief. Soon the operating room doors swung open, and a gurney was wheeled out. Linda lay motionless on it, an oxygen mask on her face, pale as a sheet. My eyes filled with tears, and I rushed to her side. I called her name, hoping she could hear me. Linda slightly opened her eyes. Her breathing was shallow, and she seemed unable to speak. I took her hand. It was cold and fragile. I begged her to hold on and reminded her of our plans to spend our golden years together, pleading with her not to leave me. A single tear rolled down her cheek, and her lips barely moved. I realized she recognized me. At that moment, the lump in my throat became too big to swallow. I silently begged her to stay. Even Adam and Eve stood nearby, unable to hold back tears, understanding that words were meaningless now. Late that night, Linda's condition deteriorated rapidly, and the doctor pronounced her passing. Mark couldn't bring himself to leave her bedside, tormented by the fear of missing her last moments. As if sensing his presence, Linda weakly opened her eyelids and mustered her last strength to raise her hand and place it in Mark's palm. He squeezed her hand tightly, unable to hold back the tears streaming down his wrist. In a barely audible whisper, like an echo from another world, she uttered a single sentence. "Mark, live well." After that, her hand went limp, and her eyes closed forever. A desperate cry escaped Mark's chest, but in response, he heard only the monotonous beeping of monitors, flatlining. This all-consuming heartache felt like the end of the world. In his 62 years, Mark had faced the loss of loved ones, but this loss was different. Perhaps because Linda was his last anchor, his defense against the looming loneliness. Now she was gone. The days and weeks after her passing blurred into a colorless sequence. He returned to the nursing home, but everything around him seemed gray and lifeless. New friends, Adam and Eve, tried to comfort him, visiting more often than usual, even bringing their grandchildren, hoping to alleviate the sadness. Mark appreciated their kindness, but the numbness that gripped his soul did not subside. In sleepless nights, he lay immersed in memories of Linda, her voice, her smile, the way she moved around the house. He remembered her gentle touches when she wiped his forehead during illness. Now all that remained was in his memory. One morning, Mark noticed a new resident at the nursing home. The elderly man looked confused, lost, and sad. He reminded Mark of himself in his first days here. Without hesitation, Mark approached him, patted him on the shoulder, and offered, "Hey, would you like to take a walk with me in the courtyard?" The man nodded silently, as if grateful for even this. Small sign of attention. They walked side by side, not exchanging words, but sharing a mutual feeling. Old age can be lonely, the loss of loved ones devastating, but sometimes simple human participation, a friendly shoulder, can lighten the burden of life a little. That memorable evening, returning to his chambers and surrendering to rest, the hero once again felt the presence of Linda's image in his thoughts. However, to his surprise, he discovered a certain transformation within himself. The agonizing pain of loss still tormented his soul, but alongside it arose a feeling of bright gratitude for the precious moments they had shared. Although her physical presence had disappeared from his life, her spiritual warmth and boundless compassion had settled in his heart forever. Over time, the hero's unwavering intention to live his life with dignity in memory of Linda grew stronger. One morning, gathering courage, he left the house and exposed his face to the gentle rays of the rising sun. Linda's words about the importance of valuing every moment, cherishing relationships, and accepting the impermanence of being came to mind. People leave, but their influence continues to live on, shaping our perception of the future. In truth, the hero realized that old age is not only a series of losses, but also a period of profound insights. The realization that every relationship, whether family ties, friendships, or chance encounters, should be cherished and protected while they are still with us. Time inexorably runs in our declining years, but this does not mean that we cannot fill our lives with meaning and gratitude. The famous writer Haruki Murakami once remarked that the aging process does not creep up on us smoothly and gradually, but rather comes in sudden waves. One barely has time to look back before a whole year rushes by and youth slips into oblivion. People begin to address him with a respectful "sir" or "ma'am," and then comes the realization that the illusion of youth has been irrevocably dispelled. The passing of parents forces one to see in the mirror one's own reflection of an aging person. At this pivotal moment, a person begins to weigh each word more carefully. He speaks less not because of a lack of thoughts, but because of an understanding of how few people are truly willing to listen and understand him. Unexpected difficulties arise on the path of life. Health problems, financial troubles, estranged children who do not have time to visit. A person discovers that, despite a wide circle of acquaintances, sincere understanding and sympathy are rarely encountered. And yet, in the night silence, alone with his thoughts, a person can feel a strange sense of peace if he has come to accept himself. He realizes that his value does not depend on the approval of others. Humility, not pride, becomes the key to peace in old age. The view of love also changes. In his youth, a person may have believed in all-consuming and eternal passion, but over the years, some relationships fade. There comes an understanding that not every love story is destined to last forever. People change, and the person himself changes. It is important to carefully preserve the memories that have shaped his personality. Life's disappointments accumulate, but along with them come moments of unexpected joy. A person ceases to place exaggerated expectations on other people, thereby freeing himself from constant disappointments. Someone might call it cynicism, but perhaps it is simply wisdom, an awareness that harmony in the world is achieved through a balance between hope and reality. First of all, it is worth realizing an undeniable truth. The most faithful companion on the path of life for each person is himself. The ability to cope with difficulties independently, heal from emotional wounds, and stand firmly on one's feet is an inner strength that cannot be taken away. Remembering this, it is important to think about the future. If life turns out in such a way that old age has to be met alone, there are ways to prepare for this period. Do not neglect creating a reliable financial base that will allow you to maintain maximum independence. It is necessary to maintain mental balance, surrounding yourself with friends, hobbies, and also, if your heart is open to new feelings, do not exclude the possibility of a companion who can bring light and joy, even if only for a short time. You should appreciate those who show genuine care, and at the same time not be afraid to ask for help, if necessary. One option may be living in a specialized community for older adults. However, if it is possible to live with children or close friends, this is also a great solution. There is no universal recipe for a happy old age. It is important to find the path that will provide maximum comfort, preserve dignity, and allow you to feel part of society in the last years of your life. As night falls, when the soul is pierced by the aching pain of loss, when images of those who have left this world resurface in memory, it is worth reminding ourselves of one simple but important truth. They live on in our hearts. Memories of shared moments, whether bright adventures or quiet evenings filled with warmth and comfort, are a priceless treasure that cannot be taken away. These moments, woven from laughter and tears, joy and sorrow, will forever remain with us, warming the soul in the darkest of times. Music,